Countries on the South American continent have a mixture of tank fleets sourced from a variety of different manufacturers. Argentina fields its locally produced but German-developed TAM. Brazil made some serious attempts at developing a local tank in the form of the Bernardini MB3 Tamoio and Anguessa Osorio, but now operates German Leopard 1s and American M60s. Venezuela has Russian T-72s and French AMX-30s, Chile has German Leopard 2A4s, etc. Though Israel had made exports of tanks in the past in the form of the M50 and M51 to Chile, the only foreign country that uses Israeli tanks nowadays is the small nation of Uruguay, bordering the much larger Argentina and Brazil. Uruguay never had a main battle tank during the Cold War era, rather using M24 Chaffee light tanks delivered by the US in the late 50s, and later 22 M41 Walker Bulldogs delivered by Belgium in 1982. However, in 1997, Uruguay finally purchased its first main battle tank. This would be the Israeli Tiran-5Sh, a T-55 captured from Israeli opponents during the Arab-Israeli Wars and refitted with Western equipment. However, before the Tirans could make their way from Israel to Uruguay, they had to cross the Atlantic Ocean. A safe place today, sure, but a dangerous one to be in during World War I and World War II, when warships, commerce raiders, and submarines stalked the vast expanses. If you're not satisfied with the conquest of land under your tracks, you can also dominate the highways with today's sponsor, World of Warships. World of Warships is a free-to-play arcade multiplayer game for PC, featuring team-based sea battles where over 400 historically based ships duke it out, from small destroyers, jack-of-all-trades cruisers, mighty battleships, carriers with pesky flyboys, or even submarines. You can also join events and fulfill missions for rewards, or even get Godzilla as the captain of your ship, if you're into that, of course. Modern tanks are the most powerful they've ever been, with amazing progress being made in all domains, from armor to mobility and firepower. However, even the best modern tank could not face off against the mighty armament of a Second World War battleship, such as the USS Texas, with its 10 356mm guns. While that seems like an epic mismatch, German units, including armor, had to endure her fire during the Normandy campaign, a clearly terrifying prospect. If you want to have fun in the game, or just have a look at all the models, and be inspired to learn about them and their history afterwards, you can download World of Warships for free. Use the promo code FIRE when you sign up, which will give a huge starter bonus to all captains joining the game, consisting of 200 doubloons, 1 million in-game credits, 20 camouflages, 7 days of premium account, and the mighty USS Texas battleship. The State of Israel, created following the partition of the Mandate of Palestine in the aftermath of World War II, fought its Arab neighbors of Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon, often supported by other Arab states, during the first decades of its existence. Egypt and Syria, in particular, used large numbers of T-54, T-55, and T-62 tanks delivered from the Soviet Union, with whom they had good relations with at that point. In the 1967 Six Days War and the 1973 Yom Kippur War, large numbers of these Soviet-delivered tanks were captured by the Israeli Defense Force. The captured tanks were given the name of Tiran. The T-54 were designated the Tiran-4, the T-55 Tiran-5, and the T-62 Tiran-6. The tanks were fairly extensively modified by the IDF. In the case of the Tiran-5, the vehicles received new fenders and storage bins, a pencil-mounted M1919A4 30 caliber machine gun, and an infantry telephone, among several others. The main modification was replacing the original 100mm gun with a 105mm M68 gun, as mounted on Israel's Magach, M48, and M60 tanks. Along with this, the tank's Soviet machine guns were all replaced with Western ones. A coaxial machine gun firing NATO 7.62, a Browning 50 caliber in the commander's cupola, in addition to the already present M1919, as well as Western radios, fire control equipment, an infrared searchlight, and so on. The Tirans were issued to reserve units within the IDF. Preferable options were available for frontline units, Centurions, Shotcalls, and later Magachs and Merkavas. At this point, Israel was still surrounded by fairly actively hostile nations, and more reserve equipment could always prove useful. In the following decades, as the Magach and Merkava entered service in large numbers, the Tirans were easy to dispose of to various allies or potential clients. Some were, for example, delivered to Lebanese Christian militias during the Lebanese Civil War. By the 1990s, the most powerful armored vehicles in the hands of Uruguay were M41 Walker Bulldog light tanks and EE-9 Cascavel armored cars. Though useful vehicles for counterinsurgency, they were quite considerably outclassed in comparison to tanks wielded by Uruguay's neighbors, Argentina and Brazil, which both had their own MBTs like the Argentinian TAM. Brazil had recently agreed to a large acquisition order, buying 87 surplus Leopard 1A1s from Belgium in 1995 and 91 M60A3s from the USA in 1996. The end of the Cold War had resulted in large numbers of surplus vehicles appearing on the market. One of the options being offered was Israeli's Tiran tanks. Israel offered the Tiran to Uruguay for the first time in 1995, at which point it was rejected. However, Uruguay came back around and took up the offer in 1997. There was some opposition to the purchase of Tiran tanks within the Uruguayan army. The vehicle was viewed as too heavy for the Uruguayan infrastructure, though it was still one of the lighter main battle tanks at around 36.6 tons. Only the 30.5-ton TAM truly is lighter, while for example Brazilian's M60A3 is around 49.5 tons, and the Chilean Leopard 2A4 55 tons. More significantly, it was viewed as quite primitive. Equipment such as the fire control system and vision devices appeared inferior in comparison to, for example, later models of the Leopard 1 and M60. Indeed, it appears the Army would have simply preferred to acquire a main battle tank of different origin. This did not, however, deter the Uruguayan government, which bought 15 Tiran-5Sh tanks from the Israelis in 1997. The 15 tanks were split between 3 different units of the Uruguayan Army. 7 were given to the Regimiento Patria de Caballería Blindado Octavo, operating from the city of Melo. 7 were given to the Regimiento Misiones de Caballería Blindado Quinto, operating from the city of Tacuarembó. The last Tiran was delivered to the Regimiento de Caballería Mecanizado de Reconocimiento Cuarto, a unit based in the capital city of Montevideo and otherwise equipped with EE-9 Cascavel armored cars. Within the 2 armored cavalry regiments, the tank component appears to be 2 groups of 3 Tirans, with the 7th tank commanding the 2 groups. Both regiments also feature a group of 5 EE-3 Jararacas. The 5th also includes 9 M113 APCs, while the 8th prefers 13 VBT Condors, fulfilling a similar role. In Uruguay, the Tirans appear to have been designated as TI-67, a colloquial designation that was not used in any official manner by the IDF. Nonetheless, this should not cause confusion. The vehicles remain of the Tiran-5Sh type. They feature an infrared searchlight linked to the main gun by braces. Unlike some of the IDF's Tirans, the Uruguayan examples do not feature a heavy machine gun. They sometimes feature a 30 cal M1919 machine gun, which is mounted on either the right or the left of the turret. The vehicles will not be re-engined and still feature the 12-cylinder V55 diesel engine producing 580 horsepower. Alongside the tanks, Uruguay appears to have purchased Israeli ammunition for the 105 mils, including M111 armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot, which serves as the tank's anti-tank round. One of the more curious aspects of the Uruguayan Tirans is that they're covered with a number of hardpoints for Blazer Explosive Reactive Armor, or ERA. However, the ERA has seemingly never been mounted on the vehicles, and it is unknown if the purchase even included these components. Ever since their introduction with the country's military, the Tirans have remained the sole main battle tank in service in Uruguay. Thankfully, Uruguay is one of the most stable countries of South America, and as such, its main battle tank fleet has pretty much only been used for training purposes. Though the country sends a disproportionate amount of servicemen to UN operations in comparison to its size and population, the Tirans have never been part of these deployments. In a photo dated from 2018, a Tiran-5Sh appears to have been a gate guardian at the base of the 5th Armored Cavalry Regiment, which raises the question as to whether or not the totality of the Tirans Uruguay acquired are even still operational. Though Uruguay has good relations with its 2 neighbors, Argentina and Brazil, one can still underline how the Tiran-5Sh can appear underwhelming in comparison to the Brazilian M60A3s as well as Leopard 1A5s acquired in the 2000s, or a potentially upgraded TAM. Israel appears to not have missed the fact Uruguay may still prove to be a future client for main battle tanks, and in 2013, an Israeli delegation presented Israel's upgraded versions of the M60, the Magach 6 and Magach 7, to the Uruguayan military. Nothing really came of it so far. Even in the Uruguayan military, the Tiran remains a small part of the armored vehicles fleet, with much larger numbers of EE-9s and M41s in service. With Uruguay unlikely to have to fight a war against its neighbors in the future, though at the same time remarkably stable ever since the end of the country's dictatorship in the 1980s, the use for cutting-edge armored fighting vehicles may simply be lost to the small South American country. Its current fleet of M41s, EE9s, Tirans, Piranhas, M113s, EE3s, VBTs, and yet another curious purchase in the form of the BVP-1s is likely enough for the Uruguayan army. This concludes our video on Uruguay's fleet of Tiran-5Sh tanks. Don't forget to check out today's sponsor, World of Warships, and use the promo code FIRE on sign-up to get a big bonus. If you like this video, please leave a like and a subscription. You can find the full information on this vehicle in the full article, which is linked in the description. If you like what we are doing and want to let us continue working on these videos, please consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be allocated to improving our articles and videos for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.